This book contains the shooting scripts for 5 select episodes from The Sopranos' first 3 seasons. It was recommended to me by one of my regular viewers, and I've been going through each episode noting the changes from script to final episode. Previously, I have covered the very first episode, the pilot's script to its final episode, and today we're going to cover the other notable episode from season 1 called College. A majority of the changes from the college script to the college episode I would classify as very small to medium type of changes. I'm just talking like a little line added here, a little word taken out there, nothing huge. So instead of going through and documenting every single change from script to episode, which was getting really tedious really fast, I wrote them all out and I got rid of all the boring ones. So these are my favorite little bits that I've noticed from the college script, the final episode. So let's get into it. The very beginning of the college episode just starts with Tony standing there on campus, camera pans around him, and then Meadow shows up, and then they start their scene. However, the script starts a little bit differently. The script begins with Tony sitting bored and restless in the admissions office building for the first college that they're looking at. He looks at a school paper that says something about a gay and lesbian student union having an event on campus. He makes a quizzical face at that. There's another cut line from Tony where he asks Meadow about how every school we go to has this gay and lesbian thing going on. Do the teachers know about this? Another funny line from Tony, obviously, but this was cut because it aligns with that previously mentioned thing that wasn't in the episode where Tony was looking at a newspaper that had something about a gay and lesbian student alliance. So if you cut that, you can't have that referenced just a minute later in the script because it wasn't there. After that scene, when Tony and Meadow are driving and she asks him very bluntly if he's in the mafia.
Are you in the mafia?
Am I in the what?
The script actually has some dialogue right before she says that. Before the line where Meadow asks, "Are you in the mafia?" there were a few lines where she talks to Tony about how Grandma said you once stole cars. And while these are just some nice little lines between Tony and Meadow while they're driving, I can totally see why they were cut because they're not very substantial. It's much more impactful for us as the audience to feel the bluntness of Meadow's question, "Are you in the mafia?" the same way Tony does. If you just start that scene with her asking, "Are you in the mafia?" it catches us off guard just like it caught him off guard.
Did the Cusimano kids ever find $50,000 in Krugerrands and a .45 automatic while they were hunting for Easter eggs?
This line from Meadow here I have not heard before, and apparently a Krugerrand is a gold coin minted in South Africa. Interesting that she mentions Tony had a pile of these worth $50,000 somewhere in their yard, and it's never mentioned again.
Mr. Scangarella, for example, advertising executive for Big Tobacco. Or lawyers? Ugh, so many dads are full of shit.
And I'm not.
I think my favorite little weird bit of dialogue cut from this whole college episode comes right after that line from Meadow about being a lawyer, when she's talking about what the other normal dads do for work and how other families are normal, and she finishes her little speech with, "Anyway, you're my sexy dad." It's an odd line, especially coming from Meadow, because she never really expresses that, whatever you want to call it, throughout the rest of the show. Next little group of changes comes from the scene where Tony and Meadow are getting gas at the gas station, and he makes a call back to Irina and then Carmela. You know, I never thought of this before, but it is kind of funny to think that he calls his Gumar first and then his wife second. I don't know. This isn't a huge change, but it's a difference in just the way the scene is presented. The script describes Irina as sprawled out in her bed during the scene, but in the final episode, as we know, she's standing and walking around. Also from the scene, there's an interesting line from Irina where she describes her cousin Svetlana's significant other as carrying her out like a white and knight satin armor.
And he carries her out like a knight in a white satin armor.
I gotta go. My daughter's coming.
Which, as we all know, is the title of an episode way later in season 2 and is actually one of the episodes covered in this book. When Tony calls his house in the script, he actually speaks to AJ first and asks him to hand the phone over to Carmela. It's only like 3 lines, but the notable thing about this that was cut was a little character moment from AJ where, even though his mom is sick with the flu, all he can do is complain about how it's too hot in the house and he almost passed out on the toilet. Sounds like a very AJ kind of thing to complain about.
How you feeling?
Better, actually. Fever just broke. I miss you, too.
How's the interviews going?
Only in the script does Carmela suggest that despite being sick, she might fly up the following day to join them in their college hunt. But Tony says, "Nah, it's a good thing you stayed home." Only in the script, when Tony's signing off from this phone call, he adds, "I'm sorry, everything's good." And that wasn't in the final episode.
Yeah. Look, I'll call you back for the motel.
Taking out the "I'm sorry" obviously makes Tony seem more of like a jerk. And when Carmela signs off on the call, the script describes her as being pissed and slamming the phone down. However, in the episode, she's just frustrated and puts the phone down. Another little change is that the script describes the rat Fabian as having a goatee. However, in the episode, he does not. When AJ brings Carmela her breakfast in bed, the script only describes his action as placing the tray down. However, in the episode, they add this little flair of presentation where his delivery was very sloppy and there was juice spilling everywhere. If I had to guess, this little change was a creative decision they thought of on set while filming because, it just seems like a very little AJ thing to do. He's just being sloppy and clumsy. When Tony calls Christopher, the script describes Chris as calling from a payphone at a strip mall. However, in the final episode, this looks more like an alleyway to me than a strip mall. When Tony's telling Christopher on the phone about Fabian Petrillo, there are a couple of line changes. The first one is probably just a creative improv choice by James Gandolfini, where the script says fucker ratted out a lot of people, but in the final episode he changes that just to rat fuck.
Rat fuck took out a lot of people. A lot of people from our outfit.
From the college episode script, there were a number of interesting terms and words I haven't heard before. The first one of which is...
Thank you. You saw this guy?
Obviously, within the context, I get what's going on. It's some kind of exclamatory remark from Christopher. However, I Googled that word with that exact spelling and couldn't find a solid definition for it. I even went to Urban Dictionary, couldn't find anything. However, there was a similar word with an A at the end of it instead of an E. And the definition is Italian slang can be used for just about anything, but the literal meaning refers to men's balls, substitute for holy shit or damn or come on, as well as many others. Mingya, why'd you play the ace of hearts on my king? And Mingya Jane, why'd you go and do that? I'm not Italian if you can't tell. Another little thing I had to look up from the script came from the following scene where Carmela is talking to Father Phil, and he says,
By the way, your Moschino pedal pusher suit, it flew out of there.
Oh, good.
I'm no fashion expert. I had to Google what Moschino pedal pusher suit was, and it looks like it's some kind of late 90s, early 2000s trendy thing. I could see Carmela wearing that. Also, look this scene. Carmela offers Father Phil some Fernet and says she was drinking some.
I was having a little Fernet. Settles the system. Would you like something?
And I had to look this up. It's apparently another Italian thing. It's a type of bitter or aromatic spirit that some say can have medicinal qualities, which is probably why she said she was drinking it because she's sick in this episode. The scene with Tony and Meadow at that fancy restaurant having dinner. In the script, there's actually some lines of dialogue that start the scene off earlier than before we see it start in the final episode. You can pause and read all this dialogue here if you want. I think this was just cut for pacing reasons to help keep the episode flowing, because I think this was a little redundant. We have seen Tony make several excuses for why he was speeding to catch up with that rat earlier, and he just does it again here. Another interesting little description that was cut from the same scene is that the script describes waitress brings Diet Coke for Meadow and a bottle of Bola Suave for Tony. It's interesting to me that they would be so specific about that particular brand and style of wine, Bola Suave. He could be drinking literally anything. Could be whiskey, could be Cabernet. Doesn't really matter, doesn't have an impact on the scene. I also had to look up Bola Suave, and if what I found is correct, it seems to be a rather inexpensive budget kind of wine. This bottle here only goes for $10. Tony usually likes to be big and flashy. I don't know why he would get something so cheap. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he thinks the name sounds fancy because it's got a foreign name. It feels sophisticated for ordering it. Or maybe he's budgeting. I don't know. Just seems weird to me that they would call for such a specific wine and that wine is so cheap. When Meadow confesses that she did speed with her friend, the script has Tony's reaction as I ought to slap the hell out of you, but the final episode has him saying I ought to slap the shit out of you.
I ought to slap the shit out of you. Where did you get it?
If I had to guess, this was a little improv from James Gandolfini that also shows Tony's more aggressive side, kind of similar to how in the pilot episode he went above and beyond in being aggressive towards Christopher. When Tony has another phone call with Christopher, the script has a line after he says don't be so sensitive that was cut from the final episode.
What, they can do it, but I can't?
Don't be so sensitive. They had a friend, Jimmy, die in prison on account of this scumbag.
In this line, there's this word which I have never seen before. So the context of this line is that in the phone call, Christopher is saying, let me go up there and deal with Fabian Petrillo myself. And Tony says, no, I'll get Paulie or Pussy to do it. And Christopher says, oh, I can't do it? Then Tony goes, no, you don't get it. This word is of their generation. You know, this guy is from the previous generation, just like Paulie and Big Pussy. I've never seen this word before, spelled Boociada. So I Googled that word with that exact spelling and I found basically nothing. There were 3 links. One was a YouTube video, totally unrelated, and the other 2 were links to this script where this word appears. So I don't think it appears very many other places. Also tried looking it up on Urban Dictionary and couldn't find anything. This word, if I were to terribly mispronounce it, is Boociada, and seems to have a similar pronunciation and spelling and usage to a word we hear Christopher say later in Season 2's D-Girl episode.
Well, I mean, is there anything other than bitch?
Bukyak.
What?
Let that one Call that one bukyag.
So if anyone knows what this word means or where it comes from, or just uses it in your everyday language, let me know. When Father Phil is talking to Carmela and he's describing the neighborhood that he grew up in, the final episode actually adds two little phrases that were not in the script. He describes his neighborhood as having a heady brew and being a melting pot.
Yonkers was mixed Jewish and Italian, you know? A heady brew.
What does that mean, heady?
Melting pot.
Also talking about Father Phil's early life, there's a cut line from the script where he says he dated a Jewish girl before going into seminary.
You think I'm a schnorrer, don't you?
A who?
Yiddish. I'm somebody who always shows up in time for free grub.
A line I never paid attention to until reading along with the script and watching the episode is when Carmela says, "Sleep is my number one," and then stops herself.
He's unhappy. Sleep is my number one. Ah, shit.
Damn, that is a dark and sad line coming from her. My God. But then again, I wonder how actually honest she's being right here, because throughout the rest of the series, she clearly seemed to enjoy the lavish lifestyle that Tony's occupation allows her to live. This next one is not a change, but just a little nitpick I have. I hate when Father Phil refers to Robert De Niro as Bobby D.
You know, originally Bobby D was supposed to have that role.
Really?
I like movies. I like Robert De Niro as an actor. I'm from the New York, New Jersey area. I've never heard anyone refer to Robert De Niro as simply Bobby D, and assumes everyone else in the conversation is like, oh, yeah, I know who you mean. I know exactly who you're talking about. This is a really silly little nitpick for me, but when Father Phil says,
If you take everything Jesus ever said, add it up, it only amounts to 2 hours of talk.
No.
why not add the phrase in the Bible? Because think about that literally. If you actually took everything Jesus said in real life, I think it would amount to more than 2 hours. You know, if you're talking just the words he said in the Bible, yeah, okay, sure, you have a point. But, you know, at some point he must have just been like, hey, apostles, how's it going? Desert's pretty hot today, isn't it? However Jesus would sound. I don't know. But I'm sure he actually said more words than were in the Bible. They mentioned a movie called Remains of the Day. I had to look it up. I've never seen it myself. And from what I found, it's apparently a very appropriate movie reference for their situation in this episode.
Well, I know you love that DVD player. I just got Remains of the Day. See? Do I know you?
Two characters come close to acting on a mutual yet repressed attraction, but ultimately decide it is too late for them to do so. Anthony Hopkins' character has a profession incompatible with marriage, and Thompson's character is married to another man. Sound familiar? This scene also has a few lines from Father Phil that were cut from the final episode where he refers to Emma Thompson as the thinking man's Jennifer Lopez.
Anything with Emma Thompson, I'm there.
Father Phil, I didn't know you looked.
To which Carmela responds with a blank stare, which is kind of funny. In the episode, when Tony is searching for Fabian and he looks through a phone book, he sees this little cutout picture of this guy. It says there's a Yellow Pages type photo of Pete, a gaunt Yankee. So I am still curious who that cutout of the person is, if it's supposed to be someone significant. Another interesting, very specific description the script has that's in the final episode is that it describes Fabian as using a Ruger 22 target pistol. Fabian could have been trying to kill Tony with any type of gun, really. It could have been a shotgun or even a long-range hunting rifle with a scope so he doesn't even have to get close. I have shot one of these before in real life, and they're a pretty fun little target pistol, but a 22 is a very small caliber thing. So, you know, if you're going to take someone down of Tony's stature, you better get a headshot or some critical area. So maybe that's why he's using it, because it's a very accurate gun. And I guess it also says something about Fabian's character that, you know, he's a sportsman, likes to go target shooting on the weekend, so he got this type of gun. Like, this isn't the type of gun that you would use in combat or something. This is for very accurate shots.
I think you should take communion.
The script has this line from Father Phil where he's referring to the supplies needed for a priest to perform the communion sacrament. He says, I carry a kit for that purpose. It's out in my car.
Why do you have that with you?
Unfortunately, I had to say mass for someone in intensive care.
Now, I don't know if this is a thing priests normally do. They just have those supplies ready in their car or their bag in case someone needs to receive the wafer at a moment's notice. I think they're also just trying to make him out to be a bit of a nerd because the script says Carmela smiles wearily, then realizes he's not kidding. If the sexual undertones of Carmela and Father Phil's storyline were never clear enough to you, the script actually describes some action as Carmela takes it on her tongue. Enough said. When we cut back to Tony and Meadow's storyline, the script actually describes a couple of shots before we see Fabian's binocular point of view shot that were not in the final episode. These shots show that Fabian slept in his car outside their motel all night long, stalking Tony and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It describes him as looking sleepy, unshaven, and, well, you know, like he just slept in a car. I don't know why they cut it. I don't think it would have taken too much time to show. I don't know why this bothered me, but the script describes his binocular shot as Bino point of view, just B-I-N-O. Just spell out binoculars, okay? Come on. You're not cool for saying bino. I've also seen this type of binocular point of view shots done better in other movies and TV shows, like usually have some kind of visual overlay, like a cross section or the distance finders. Back to the Sopranos household, this isn't necessarily a change, but I like how they describe AJ walking as his footsteps clomp upstairs.
I'm home!
That just seems like the perfect strange little word to describe how a young, clumsy AJ would make his way up the steps. When Tony finally catches up and attacks Fabian, there's a line cut from the script where he says, "Let go the fucking piece, let it drop." You know, it's not totally essential, but it does explain why we see the shot of him dropping the gun. The line from the final episode where Tony says, "You took an oath," was actually not in the script. They probably made it up while they were filming that scene.
You know how much trouble you're in now? You took an oath.
Right after that, there were also some lines cut from the script. Fabian says, "I got a little girl," and Tony says, "Guys with little girls went to prison." When Fabian is pleading for his life, there was a small line cut where he says he's just a dad this time.
I had a gun, but I didn't do it. Because of her, I told myself, it's just a coincidence.
Even though they cut these lines from the final episode about fathers and daughters that were in the script, I do think it's interesting because it does tie into the father-daughter relationship going on with Tony and Meadow throughout the episode.
Jimmy says hello from hell, you fuck.
That was another little something made up on the scene from Gandolfini. Tony uses this Italian slang exclamatory remark,
Avanapolo, what do you think happened?
which literally translates to "go to Naples," but its meaning is something more like "go to hell." Fafanapola, get out of here, nothing, you're crazy, forget about it. It's just like dismissive remark. When Tony and Meadow arrive at the college and she goes in to talk with the admissions guy, the script actually describes the sound of an ancient clock ticking in the background. Maybe it was like the school clock tower or something, but that wasn't in the episode at all. I think it's funny how that student describes Nathaniel Hawthorne as he's our most famous alum.
He's our most famous alumnus.
That got me thinking for a second. How many ways are there to say someone who used to go to this college? You got alum, alumnus, and alumni. They all mean the same thing, right? Is there any difference between those? When Tony's finally back home, Carmela says, "I look like the friggin' Thornbird over here."
Would I have told you about it voluntarily if there'd been anything to be ashamed of? Do I look like the friggin' Thornbird over here?
I had to look this up. It was before my time, but this was a TV show about a forbidden love affair between a woman and a priest. Seems like another very appropriate reference for their storyline. Also, the final line in the episode that comes from Tony, the script describes it as OS, which is abbreviated for off-screen, and as we can see in the final episode, he is not off-screen. Well, there you go. These were the most notable changes that I found from the college episode script to its final episode. This may be a hot take. Some people are probably going to disagree with me. I don't really care. It's just how I feel after rewatching the episode, reading along with the script, combing through every line, documenting the changes, noticing all this little stuff. I think this episode is kind of boring. It's not my favorite episode. I totally understand why this episode is significant in a historical sense for TV. There's that whole thing of HBO didn't want to film it the way it was because they thought it was too edgy at the time for the main character we're following to kill someone that wasn't in self-defense. This is a mob guy out for vengeance. To really introduce the anti-hero. I get all that. I know all that. I've seen those videos too. I thought Tony's pursuit of Fabian went on a little too long. Like he goes to that phone book, he goes to a store, he goes to another store, he goes to his house. But I think this is kind of a mid-episode. Not my favorite to rewatch. Well, that's about all I got for today. If you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always. And when I come back to do the next script to episode comparison, it will be for the season 2 episode, The Happy Wanderer. So, till next time, goodbye.